Sure. You do the same thing. Okay. Yeah. Great. Nice. Yeah, well, oh, God. Yeah.
Huh? Get up and dance.
Chuck, do you have me?
Hey, JD.
Hey, Andrew.
Yes. Yes, we can hear you.
Great. Chuck, is there any way to see the room at all?
Just trying to figure that out.
Okay.
Andrew, is it? Dan Adams. And somebody take your spot. What's that? Your spot. Yeah. Yeah, part of that late. Yeah, I know. Hello, how you doing?
Jeff. Guys, how long we didn't know this?
That's right. I forgot about that.
You know how I can get this to show the room?
What is your camera? You have a weird face.
Okay, so what do I need to?
The only way you can do it would be to turn the whole computer towards it.
No, we've done it before this way. So
She's like, "Ah, bigger."
see, that turns it on, but
They have a secondary camera in
no, it's all done through here. Share content.
Zoom.
Microsoft Teams.
He's online. Right, still, JD's on.
Yeah, I'm trying to get the camera to work to show you guys. Yeah, JD's online. He had a positive.
Right, yeah.
Is it 7.5? What'd you do?
No, I don't. But I sorted it.
Yeah.
But it's in kind of
Melton.
it's because of yes.
Yeah. I heard about this.
Heard that, yes.
JD, I don't know if I'm going to get you the whole room.
Okay.
I
I'll
don't
do
know.
my best. I'll do my best to
All right.
listen and yeah, if you still want me to do the secretary stuff, I will. Yeah, I'll do my best.
Well, we've got this all recorded, so don't worry about that part of it. Because we can go back and listen to it if we need to.
Okay.
I'd like to call this meeting, the Culver Board of Zoning Appeals to order and ask everybody to stand for the pledge of allegiance.
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
First item of business tonight, I'd like to welcome a new board member tonight. This is Andrew Melton. And he is brand new to the Board of Zoning Appeals, and we're glad to have him here. And our crowds usually aren't quite this big, but
I appreciate the support. Thank you.
Mr. President,
yes,
you remind everybody that's being recorded.
yes, we are being recorded tonight. So if you don't want it to be recorded, then don't say it. Because it will be taken. Okay. I will handle roll call since we don't have a secretary with us tonight. We have Dan Osborne, Barry McManaway, Andrew, I just forgot, Melton. We have JD Hubler online with us tonight, and my name's Dan Adams, and I'm president of this board. We're going to move right on to the petitions. The first petition we have this evening is 2021-030B. That's a petition filed by James Easterday, attorney on behalf of Karla, Thimjon, and Jim J. Weirick.
Good evening. How are you folks this evening? Just glad I could get through Borough and get here tonight. So,
That was quite a mess out there.
but I heard it's 31 hours worth. Basically, what we're asking for is a determination, which to us is very simplistic, but the determination that the line for lakeside setback on the property on South Street that we mentioned here is in fact from the furthest projection of the Weirick Peltz house to the furthest projection of the Thimjon house. And there seemed to be some confusion based upon a September hearing that occurred here as to just exactly where that line was. And we thought before anything was built, before there's any variances granted, or before anything moves forward, it would be appropriate to determine exactly where that line is. And I think the ordinance that you deal with almost exclusively is the L1 Lake District ordinance. Seems to be the one we're in here on all the time. And so I've given you the appropriate page of that ordinance with respect to this property, because this is an L1 Lake District. And that ordinance, paraphrasing, basically says if the property either side of the subject property are improved with a primary residence, you determine the setback line from the furthest extension of the primary residences, including any raised decks or patios. That's what we're asking you to determine here tonight. The only thing that I can possibly think of that would be even suggest an argument as to whether or not there is a lot next door to the south that has a house on it that is improved. And so I've included the actual plot plan of that subdivision, the lot one, and that subdivision, and it, I don't think there's any dispute. There's a house on that lot. So for that reason, we think it should be gone from the corner of that.
And of course, the big confusion is the fact that there's a road going in the middle of that lot.
That's exactly what.
And that's where the confusion started,
Correct.
in determining that line of sight.
Correct.
And, but the lot itself is one continuous lot.
Right.
It does go to the lake edge. It just happens to have a road going through it.
That's exactly correct.
Mr. President,
Yes.
I would like to correct what Mr. Easterday said. The line of sight has been determined. What he's here is to question my determination.
Right. Right. Yes, because you, and I don't have that with me. What you had determined was because it was an empty lot.
Correct. Because there was no house on that side.
Done that part.
And actually, the ordinance calls for 25-foot setback from the lake. I came back 50 feet and made that the line of sight. That's as much as the ordinance is.
So this is what your line of sight right here. Correct, it's orange.
That,
I mean, that's what you're saying should be the line
yeah,
of sight.
we
But
agree.
it lines up with two houses to the north of that and the corner of.
Correct. And that was actually given to us, if you notice in my brief, that was given to us by Jonathan. And when basically we questioned it before this property was ever put up for sale. And he came back and said, this is the appropriate line of sight for this property. And so that particular picture you're looking at and the emails that are attached to it came from John's.
And for those of you who don't know, Jonathan Leisk used to be
I would request if, once we go to the audience, if you want to speak, please state your name so that the secretary can get your name down. And if you have an address here in town, make sure you give that. Questions from the board?
Chuck, so I'm assuming what your determination, is it from the corner of that light blue line to the corner of the Thimjon's property?
Yes. It's 25 feet back from the, 50 feet back from the lake.
Okay. I'm going from the blue line there to this corner, right? here to there.
That blue line that.
Now, what's this blue, okay,
Yeah,
that's,
that's property line.
okay, so where is? That's, so so this,
So back to what we're saying. He determined it as not having a house on that lot next door. Yet, look at that lot. Plotted by the town. How long ago was that, Mr. Peach?
Oh, probably.
I knew they'd subdivided it.
They said, and they went to court plan. And they approved.
We look at exhibit 3, then that's the 2 lots. It's 2 acres now.
And the exhibit 4 is the same thing, but I just took a highlighter and
Proof of mine here, that's lot 2, it's lot big.
Hey, Chuck,
Yes.
could you clarify for me when you determined the 50 feet, how you arrived at 50 feet and knowing that it was on one lot, why you went another 25 feet towards the west?
Only to take any question out of whether it was going to be too far or not.
Okay, thank you. So then my next question is there any new information that we have received from the petitioners that we didn't hear on the September 2nd meeting, or that you didn't have readily available to you, Chuck, on the 29th of 2020 when the determination was made? And the reason why I'm asking that is, you know, if there's no new information that you see as relevant to this case, then I have to assume that your decades worth of experience and the fact that the town continues to have confidence in you, that this is pretty straightforward, unless you see that there has been presented new information that we didn't have in September or something like that.
Okay, just for clarification, JD, in September, we didn't hear this case. There was a property owner that was here and spoke at that time, but we didn't make any determination, I don't believe.
Correct, but Mr. Hewen was there. Go ahead. That's
well,
fine.
in September, there was no request for a variance, and we raised the issue at that point in time that there would be a variance needed based upon the plat that they were presenting to the town. And that was discussed at length, but you decided correctly, I think. There's nothing before us on that, and so therefore we did not decide that. And we, after that hearing, we decided that it's appropriate to decide that, so we know exactly where they can go and where we can go. And that's the reason we filed the petition ourselves.
That's not true.
Questions, comments from the board?
Yeah.
No, you had.
I guess this is for Chuck. So if the petitioners, so I guess, what's the difference of this property as far as the line of sight and what you've determined? If this house is built, how far back would they have to build it to be in the line of sight that Mr. Easterday is referring to?
Clarify that a little.
Okay, so the line of sight that he's talking about The line of sight, the straight line, and the line of sight that you determine that this home is built, what's the difference? How far back would this home be built if we went with Mr. Easterday's line of sight?
It would remain basically where it's at and with Mr. Easterday's exhibit.
The plot plan comes up to the westerly line of the former railroad, according to this, at 101.38 feet.
Exhibit B. If you look at that, they would have to leave the house exactly where it's at.
What is the difference between the red line and the blue line there?
That's just,
I'm just saying, what is that distance approximately?
that's parcel numbers.
Because that's about the difference between where it is currently and where it could be, according to the plot.
The red line itself is the line of sight.
That's what I'm determining. How far in front of that line of sight do they want to build this home?
Well, they have, I don't know that they have a final thing. I think what we left it on, and we're not dealing with that. We're just determining what the line of sight is.
Okay, I'm sorry.
That's
So
all
I got a
we're
little bit
dealing
off
with.
script here.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
They're not presenting anything for a variance until we determine what the line of sight is.
Okay, and I think the property owners will be able to explain that better.
Yeah, the appropriate time when you open the public, then I'd like to address
Sure.
that.
Thank you. Appreciate that.
I got a question for Chuck as far as I'm trying to find it here, and I apologize for this, but I know under your determination under this line of sight, as far as practice had been used before, and I know we've got to go by the writing, but in the development standards in this book, I'm trying to find it, because I know in the past, we have only used the line of sight when there is actually a structure on this other property, but as far as determination, as far as where that property is because of the road, or is it, this is what I want to try and find out where we come up with the determination. If you use the line of sight from the 50 feet back or whatever, you never went by the structure. And if you were determined that when the structure in order to use is for the line of sight, our past was if there was nothing on the other side of the lot that was proposed to be built on, the line of sight was never used. And I want to get it in the
So
right.
you're telling me that they could go 25 feet from the.
I'm saying if the other half, yeah, possibly. I'm saying depending on what it says in here.
I could be wrong on that.
And I'm not trying to say I'm right either right here. I'm just trying to find the standard.
Did you find in our ordinance where it says line of sight?
I see it on one side, part line of sight,
Where?
but on the first part on L1.
That's.
On page 21 of the 24, page 24, which is my exhibit 2.
And that was his exhibit.
That's my exhibit 2. I
know when this was added, I know we did have a development standard where you would determine.
If it was my determination, there's not a house there, there's a road between it. You can't say that the property's contiguous.
Right.
that's
So where would you determine line of sight if there's not one that is contiguous with this? That's my question. Because if you don't have a property built on the other side to point the line of sight because it's based off the structure as far as how far it is from the lake. If we don't, then where would we be standing as far as 125 feet or 50 feet or across the road to the other place? You see what I'm saying as far as that goes?
Not exactly.
If there's not, all right, anywhere else on the lake, and the way it's always been a practice, and I know with the new books and stuff like that, I'm wanting to know exactly where the writing is now as far as the development standards as well, if that's not been added as well. Because the practice before was if there wasn't any property built on each side of an empty lot that you would build on, you tore down, make it empty, whatever. The line of sight was not used because you didn't have a determination on the part of the point. And I'm,
That's not in our development standards
it's not in there anymore.
right now.
Okay.
That's been practice, you're correct.
It was practiced, but I know that we had it written somewhere, but I couldn't find it.
That was taken out when I put in the present ordinance.
Okay.
On page 24, they changed it to a line of sight. Used to be an average setback and they changed it to a line of sight. And
Well, my feeling is if it was truly a vacant lot, that's how we would determine it.
Correct.
But my feeling is, when I look at what the town has plotted and given as a lot, this isn't a vacant lot. It's a lot with a road running through.
Exactly correct.
And my feeling is the line of sight should be with the houses on the lot. But I don't know, that's just my own feeling here.
The only reason when it was plotted that was included in the lot across, because our ordinance says you cannot make a lot that doesn't meet standards. So that lot on the lakeside could not be standalone by itself. And you all remember how that came about was when the railroad came through. That was railroad property and it was deeded over to whoever wanted it was closest owner. So if at the time that was plotted, that could have been a separate lot, it would have been. Go just right around the corner on West Shore, and there's a strip of land there that's probably 10 feet wide.
Right.
You could never make that a lot either.
Wouldn't be considered.
But the town did make this a
It
lot.
wouldn't be buildable.
And so we're talking about a decent lot, not buildable to refer to it for a line of sight. It would be feasible.
But the fact that the town did allow that to be funded as one lot, I don't know how we can dispute that.
There's not a house on it.
On this lot, there is. It just happens to have a road through it. I mean, and it says lots 1 and 2 on there. I mean, and then they numbered it, lot 1, lot 2. And that was done 3 years ago, 4 years ago. That didn't come before this board.
No, that's the
It didn't come before me.
But right, but it is one lot.
And I think it's important to note that the purpose of this hearing here today is not to determine the feasibility of a setback or a variance or what's good for the community or what's good for the lot. We're just asking you for an interpretation of your ordinance.
No, you're not asking them for an interpretation. You're asking them whether I was right or not. That's the only thing that can come before them, not an interpretation.
Yeah, I don't mean to speak out of turn, but I think you got to read the petition that Mr. Easterday filed. I mean, it's clear what he's asking. He wants a front yard setback determination that would be construed against my client.
Okay, and we'll come back. We'll come back to you in a minute, okay?
Yeah, I'm sorry.
And
I'm sorry.
yeah, I'm just, but we need to make sure that we get your name down and all that
Sure.
stuff before. Yeah, and we will open it up with this. We're not finished here. I just want to see if the board members have anything before I do open it up. No, I won't hear. Okay. Mr. Manaway, Any questions?
Rather listen a little bit more.
Okay. Mr. Hubler, do you have any questions?
I'm good right now. Thanks, Mr. President.
Mr. Melton?
Thank you, sir.
Okay. Now, comments from the floor. And if you please introduce yourself, give us your name and who you're representing or whatever.
Certainly. So my name is David Barker, attorney from Carmel, Indiana, 650 North Rangeline Road. And President Adam, thank you. Sorry for I can interrupt you, board. Thank you for hearing us this evening. I represent CSW Holdings, which is a family LLC. The family is here. They bought 1150, which you're aware of. They've been here before. Just introduced. We have Patsy Skelton, her husband Tim, Nancy Warner, Greg Warner, Jay Cowan, and Carrie Cowan. And their goal is to not come up here and alienate neighbors, come up here and cause an issue, come up here and put pressure on Chuck. I submitted, and I hope you guys have copies. If you didn't, I emailed to all the board members, just kind of a factual overview, introduction of the parties. And they, through their realtors here, they did their due diligence because they wanted to buy a cottage that they could construct. If you notice, the Thimjon beautiful lake cottage home is very large, and so they were concerned. We've got an irregular lot, we've got a roadway going through it, and they wanted to make sure they did everything right before they put quite a bit of money into the property. They did all the due diligence. They got a decision made by the building commissioner, and that decision clearly shows, and you have it in your exhibit, but clearly shows that the line of sight is on one corner, which would be to the north, almost 71 feet back from the lake. And on the other corner, as Mr. DeWitt has commented, it's over 50 feet back from the lake. So when you look to your L1, page 24, as Mr. Easterday said, and you look to, and I think it answers your question in a roundabout way. And it talks about what Mr. Easterday said, you want a structure and you want to put a straight line. That's what you do with setbacks, right? But it says minimum lot frontage is 50 feet. But then it says minimum front yard setback. So if we've got a lot of any time on there, it's got to be a minimum of 25. Well, this is way beyond 25, way beyond. So, I mean, Mr. DeWitt didn't, this wasn't a where they're wanting to push the structure forward so far that they're going to block any view. I walked the properties earlier today. It just isn't it. So I think the minimum is 25 feet. If there was nothing on a parcel, I think that you say, well, there's nothing, there's 3 parcels, there's no buildings. What's the minimum from the lake? It's 25. I think what this board has to think about and consider is if we were back in the old days where we were platting and doing meets and bounds and everything was square, and you just had a square and the lake was square and everything was parallel to the lake, then it's pretty easy to interpret that. This situation, it's not square, and that's the real problem here. This situation, you've got a road that separates it. The lake, it curves around. The house is totally back, and it's this Weirick property. No offense, Mr. Weirick's here. This Weirick parcel, which I understand President Adams is saying, hey, it's one parcel, it's a lot. It's a split parcel. And so they may have combined it. I mean, I combine real estate parcels together all the time. I divide them all the time. But you have to look at the practicality, and that's what this board's here for. You have to look at, there's a roadway going through here, and the lake curves out. With that said, and I don't want to repeat myself through my submission, I would hope that you would take this under advisement and read the submission. But at the end of the day, if you look, this Weirick property, which we're talking about as using as part of this determination, that's what he's looking into. He can't even see my client's house to be built. He can't even see the existing house. When he looks out of his property, and again, I apologize, so I think it's Peltz Weirick, so I think it's half and half ownership, at least that's what the deed of record says. So if Meredith Peltz is here, I apologize if I've not spoken about her. But these are trees I understand the town controls, either in an easement or right of way. Nobody can even see that. That property doesn't even factor into this determination. And that's the gist of my argument in the documents that I gave you in response, because we're not the petitioner here, right? We're sitting back saying, hey, we're waiting on a building commissioner that made a decision. He made a decision. My clients have invested a lot of money in addition to buying the property for drawings and everything else. So they want to live by this line of sight determination, and they want to comply with everything. And they don't plan, if this line of sight stands, they don't plan to come back with any variances. They're not gonna alter the height. They're gonna stay within the 35 feet. They're gonna be like 32.5 feet. They're not gonna ask for anything additional from the town or the board. They're gonna comply completely. And so I think when you start talking about line of sight, and I stood on the property tonight, if you look at the Thimjon, I mean, wow, what a house. I mean, what windows, everything else. But I mean, you can see clear down the lake. In actuality, if you go back to my meets and bounds of my squareness of you talk about when you have alleys and you have streets, it's real simple. If everything's parallel, then you just put the line of sight with all those. You say, hey, all my new subdivisions are either have 25 to 30 foot setbacks if they're acre lots. That changes. But in this case, this is following the lake, and I drove the whole lake tonight. I mean, there is no way if you took a line of sight determination as Mr. Easterday's wanting, there's violations everywhere because there's curves everywhere. And so if you took the next house over here and took the line of sight from that house, you'd be cutting across. So I can't speak for the town manager in the past that made that determination, but my understanding per your guys' own ordinance is that that isn't something the town manager determines. So if Mr. Easterday and his clients relied upon that determination a few years ago, well, I don't know what to say, because my understanding is that the building commissioner makes that determination. And my understanding in talking factually with people through this is, and I think it's Russ Mason, if I correct it, he said, I thoroughly agree with Mr. DeWitt's determination. That's how I made the determination. Furthermore, when you look at the Weirick property, my whole argument in my papers, and I'm not going to go all through the facts, is that it's not relevant to make this determination. You further have Hoosier Lane, which is an alley behind it. So this is just a, grouped together parcel, but really split, and it doesn't even factor in. And to show that they're not using their house, the Peltz Weirick house, to show that they're not using that as everybody else is on the lake, they're using this split parcel that President Adams is saying, hey, it's all one parcel. They're using that. They have a fire pit out there, they have a pier out there. The lake frontage property they own is the split parcel. Their house does not sit on the lake. They don't view things from their house. They go out here and they set the fire pit, they use it. So for Mr. DeWitt to take a measurement from this part of the parcel, which I'm calling split parcel, to me, that meets the ordinance. And again, it would call into question if we were asking for it. I think one of you asked the question, well, what's kind of the different feet? We're still way above this page 24 minimums. And we're 71 feet on one side and over 50 feet on the other. And so I don't know how else would it curve the lake. If you did 25 feet, kind of what you were asking, and said, okay, let's don't consider that lot over there. And let's say we have then you can go 25 feet based on your ordinance. And so we're not asking for that. We're just asking that they be allowed to build what they proposed without any variances and this board supporting Mr. DeWitt's determination. And there's a lot of other factors in there. Again, I don't want to belabor it, and I certainly would hope that if we have additional evidence. I think the gentleman asked a great question, because what he was saying is they relied on that determination. They invested a lot of money back September 29th.
2020.
Yeah, and that decision was made based on this determination. That was a very correct question to say, has there been any new evidence by the petitioners coming today? Not me, not our clients. Is there any new evidence? No, there isn't. He's trying to go back to a town manager decision that my understanding, didn't have the authority to make that decision to start with. So again, I'm not getting argumentative. I'm just trying to say we're here to comply with all your standards. I've also included in here the builder's specs, which you'll see it's a builder, Gerard, Dean Jones, correct? Has built quite a few properties up here. I represent a number of people up here on the water, and they're not looking to cause problems. They're not looking to build something that's going to block any view, block light, space, air, anything. They're looking to comply and be good neighbors and have their family here. They have an elderly mother who's wheelchair bound, so that went into the design of their home. They're wanting to get that done. And I think plenty more stuff to talk about. And if you guys want hard copies of anything, I've got the people want hard copies of what I filed with the BZA, I've got extra copies. But I think that the gist of the whole thought process is there has to be a determination that's consistent with the rest of the lake, and to go to a split parcel corner, which is not even a front corner of a building, and cut across. I mean, you basically, as I think he asked the question, you'd basically be right where the current, I think was the Goshes that owned it. You'd be right where they're at. And yet you have a really big, nice home to the left that was able to be built, but they had an easier line of sight because the water is parallel. This lot is an odd shaped lot because the road cuts through it. And that's why Mr. Weirick and Peltz had a little strip out front. So I think the argument and the support for Mr. Witt is that's really where the line of sight should come, and they're not even going to use it that much. With that said, spoke to Mr. Clevenger. My clients are here this evening, and I said, look, this is what I do. I did the town of Fishers, I do Carmel. When they came to me, I said, we'll give them a deed restriction. Get approval, give them a deed restriction. We'll give them a deed restriction for the rest of history. They won't even ever have to come back before the board. Because we'll give a deed restriction that says, if you approve Mr. DeWitt's line of sight, then we'll put a deed restriction on this parcel that will never allow anybody to build anything in front of them. Even though they have a family LLC and sort of intent, it's never going to leave the family, which a lot of people do up here. They're willing to give that deed restriction. And that to me, kind of put your money where your mouth is. Just saying, hey, we made this investment. We'll do that because we're not trying to be greedy here. We're just trying to have a chance to enjoy the parcel. So with that said, I won't belabor anymore. Any comments that you want to make? So we're just here to try to comply, and I think this is, I think the key language that we're skipping over is immediately adjacent. The last point I'll make, and I think the question for this board, even going forward with their own ordinances, what's immediately adjacent mean? So the Thimjon property next to the CSW property, they're immediately adjacent. Our side yard setback is 10 feet. Now we go to the south side of our property, and that setback's 25 feet. Well, why is it 25 feet?
That's the road.
Because of the road, because there is no immediate adjacent building next to it. If it was, as Mr. Clevenger wants to argue, that this is Easterday, I'm sorry, Clevenger got the other law firm. If it was that, then we would have a 10-foot setback. So that in and of itself causes you to take that into consideration. Why they have 25 feet on one side and 10 on the other? Because they don't have a structure beside them.
And I mean, we can talk for hours about this, but we also have to look at our responsibility as board. Because if we don't think that, if whoever decides on this, or whatever we decide they don't think that that's the right thing to decide, it could be taken to court. And it might be a judge that makes that decision. And I want to try to make that decision not based on what you want to build next door, on what is the facts. And that's what we have to base it on, is what's the facts. Now, if you interpret it as one lot, or you interpret it as two lots, or a split lot, whatever, what we're trying to determine here is what is the right interpretation for this. I don't want it to go to court, but it very well could. And if it does, I don't want to be made a fool of and then say, boy, you're real stupid to say that wasn't a lot, because it was a lot. I think you understand that where we're coming from is not the house that you're going to build, and I hope you build a very nice house there. It's not that. We're trying to make the right decision here in interpretation of what this is, because this is not going to be the only time we have line of sight interpretations on the lake, believe me. It's one of our biggest things that we deal with all the time. And because of it being lake properties, there are a lot of variances. There's lots of different things that come up. Well, this has always been there, whatever, so there's lots of things that we have to look at, but we need to be sure that what we think what decision we're making is the right decision. I hope I make.
No, you're making perfect sense, and I guess what I want to say to you is, I certainly didn't drive up here tonight for the reason saying, hey, I want to go to court. I drove up here for the reason to try to support my clients and say, hey, I understand municipalities, I understand growing pains, I understand when you have redevelopment areas and you tear structures down. I know at Wawasee, you're not even allowed to tear the entire structure down. You gotta retain 2 walls, okay? So I get that, that's not the intent here. The intent was my clients invest a lot of money based on a building decision and a building commissioner decision. And they did their homework and due diligence just as they were supposed to do before they closed. And now they've closed. And so I'm saying, okay, we have an issue because we have adjacent. Timmy, an adjacent property, and my argument, Weirick Pelt's not an adjacent property, coming and petitioning this board, kind of putting pressure on you guys to say, we're attacking Mr. DeWitt's decision. And that's, I'm with you on that. I want you guys to make the right decision. And we're here in 100% support of Mr. DeWitt. But what I want you to hear, President Adams, is that we also are saying, we don't want to go to court. It came out of my mouth that we give a deed restriction.
I'd like to bring up something too, and you said several times, and I know it's used loosely when the time this line of sight comes up. The ordinance calls for a line of sight. It has nothing to do with view. I've been realized, and I want everybody to know that as far as intent, the ordinance was in, view was never an object where somebody's going to have more of a view of the lake from their angle, from somebody else with another angle. That we can establish an ordinance to do that. And you said that yourself, talking about curvature. I mean, if we had a square swimming pool out there, then we could probably do that, four different ways. But we never had view as far as in this, and it keeps coming up as far as arguments against or arguments for each time this comes up. Now, I think Chuck has probably addressed this several times, that it's been brought to his attention that the view is blocked if somebody builds a house within that line. And it's never been the intention of a line of sight. It's more as far as a consistency or construency as far as line with the lake and the houses to being in line. You can't build all the way around the house without obstructing view somewhere. I mean, honestly. And so I want to say too, that I agree with the statement that the town manager did not really have the authority to do that, but they do have the authority to stand beside the man that makes the decision to help him see things that he didn't see or did see. So the building commissioner was in all his rights as far as what he established, because he's authorized by the planning commission to do so. And as far as we want to establish whether he's right or not, as far as his job description, is if there's a dispute between different landowners in the site, if there is a dispute that can't come to determination, then the building commissioner will make that determination. So I stand behind Dr. Witt's decision on the line side.
Danny, you had a question earlier that I don't think got answered. You said how much further would they move the house? 7 foot 4 inches is what they got. And you can see
7 feet is the difference in what we're talking about as far as where this house would go.
yes.
Okay, thank you.
If I could respond briefly, he's used the term split lot. This is not a split lot, except for the railroad right of way and the easement for the road. This lot has been legal description for over 100 years. So that's not the issue. The issue is, how do you work with your ordinance? Where do we go? I have the highest respect for the building commissioner. He and I have worked together for years and years and years, and we'll continue to work together. But in this particular situation, we think that the ordinance has a different interpretation as to how you determine that line. And with true candor, I don't know where you come up with 50 feet. I just don't know where that would come from. So we think that the correct is based upon the plat we've showed you in the line of sight. Thank you.
I'd have to disagree with what you said, that it's been there for 100 years. The railroad was there 100 years ago.
I said,
so that wasn't ever part of anything else. The railroad owned it.
the legal description for the lot was all the way the lake. But you had the railroad going through it, and you had the easement for the highway going through it. And it's been that way for many, many, many years.
So nobody owns what the railroad. They own the railroad.
The railroad, we've been through that 100 times, but the railroad was an easement for the railroad, and when the easement terminated, it reverted to the adjoining landowners.
Yes.
I'm Karla Thimjon, address is 1146 South Street. So we're the next door neighbor. I just wanted to fill in a couple of areas just from some of the comments of kind of how this all evolved from our side. So before we bought our house 5 years ago, we did make a call to the town. We were told the line of sight from each side of us would go from house to house. And then when the Gotchas put their lot up for sale, we were concerned because we knew that actually the house on each side of us eventually would get sold and torn down in a relatively few years. And so we wanted to make sure we were clear on exactly what that meant. So I called the town, I was forwarded to Jonathan. He sent me the email that you all have today. You'll notice that Chuck was actually copied on that. And at the time, there was no reply from Chuck indicating that it was wrong. So I knew I had that. I had saved that for over a year. So I sent it to Chuck again, and I think it was July when we had the meeting next door. This was before he came out and set the 50-foot setback. So I resent it to him just to remind him of this original email, just to make sure it was okay. Did not get a reply back from him. It did go to the meeting then that the neighbors graciously invited us to, and that was when it was still set at the 25-foot setback. And so we were out in the yard. I told Chuck, I said, I have this email, I've been told this for 5 years. And he said, can we go in your house and look? So we went up, just the two of us, looked out the windows, went on the deck, looked at the deck. And that's when he said, okay, well, let's make it 50 feet because that makes it a little bit less, cumbersome. So I think that's where the 50-foot came from, but that's one of the reasons why we're here is because we have been told this for 5 years. We tried everything we could to get the information we needed to make the understanding of this. And we are obviously concerned because of what precedent it would set for the other side of our house, as far as where people who eventually build on that side, what kind of precedent does this set if this house moves forward? I don't know if the drawing has changed since the last time I officially saw it, but I really felt like at that time the current drawing was sitting definitely more than 7 feet in front of where the current house is. Because I thought the drawing was that the flat side of their house came up to the front of our deck.
Same drawing that you saw.
Yeah, this is the same.
Right, but isn't the flat side of the house up as far as the current house sits, as far as the front of their deck?
Yeah. The plan that we took, I'm Nancy Warner, by the way, CSW, I live in Carmel, but this is our revised plan that doesn't require a variance, where we moved my mother's main floor bedroom back further toward South Street to comply with all of the setbacks. The plan that Mrs. Thimjon saw was, you see how we're 7 feet back, was 18 feet back from the sight line, way, way further back than what Chuck said. As a favor to our neighbors, we moved the entire structure back 5 more feet, which means we needed more setback variance when we came to you in August. So we were more than 18 feet back from the sideline setback, and we were willing to do a deed restriction on 18 feet back, which was denied. So
When you say back, you're saying from the water.
from the sight line,
From the
from that
yeah.
sight line, 18 feet back from the sight line. So go.
But that would be from the water even. They pushed it back and put the bedroom
That would never go
back. Correct.
That is the original plan revised back. This is our revised. Yes, and we were asked, can you move it back any further from our neighbor? And we said, yes, we will do that. We don't have to, but we will do that.
But then you would be required a variance for your.
Correct. We needed it because of the
But it wasn't
25 foot.
Rejected because it was never broke.
Right. We never even voted on the setback, so, or the variance, I'm sorry.
And I'll go back to what our job here is to determine the line of sight.
Right.
And this other, it's gonna be, it's not,
Yeah.
whether it's correct.
Chuck's line of sight is correct. That's what he's trying to do.
Because we're not here to determine if what you're building is fine. It's,
Right.
we've got to concentrate on this, get that taken care of, then we go from there. And if we don't, I mean, we can discuss plans all along, but if we haven't agreed on the line of sight, then.
Right, but Mr. Easterday is wanting to know that the process of determination, am I correct?
I
In other words,
know the
what-
process.
What is the whole
I
process?
know what the
Where-
process is. I want you to do it.
You want to
We
do
did do
it?
it.
Well, follow the ordinance. That's what I want to do.
Chuck, when you were making this determination, did you consider that road making this not immediately adjacent?
That's correct.
So that's why you made the determination to go back from the lake, yes, because of the separation of the road.
The road determines how far CSW has to set back. So then the road is the determining factor. That's why I made that. And we're not here for the BZA to decide what the setback is. All we're here to do is determine whether I was correct or not.
You considered the only immediate adjacent property to the south to be the split parcel or whatever you want to call it, this, the part to the east of the road.
That's correct.
With no structure.
Yes.
I'm Jim Sturman, live at 2552 East Shore Lane in Culver. And I was the realtor that handled the transaction when they bought the property. I don't think I need to reiterate what the issue is. I would say that in August of, or actually in July of 2020, these families expressed an interest in buying the property. On August 31st, we issued a purchase agreement and it was accepted on September 2nd. We spent 4 weeks analyzing off of a survey with Mr. DeWitt what was possible on the property, and the purchase agreement was subject to them being able to build an adequate structure on 146 feet of frontage, which is what the size of the lot is. There's a lot of ground there. I guess the only other point I'd make is we entrusted, or I entrusted my clients, and they entrusted their situation in investing a tremendous amount of money in that lot on Mr. DeWitt's recommendation. And certainly I'm biased. I think he's right. I also would say that in one of the meetings that I've attended on this issue, that that you respectively indicated that this body is not about black and white. It's about trying to get a compromise or to get a meeting of the minds where neighbors get along with neighbors and the right things done. And I wrote that down at the time. We've been at this since September of last year, and they've offered a compromise that was rejected by Mr. Easterday and his client. So
I don't know what that compromise is that you're talking about. And again, I'm going back to, we've got to make a decision on this. And I don't want it to end up in court. I want to make the right decision that is legally the decision that I think I should make. And I'm not doing it because the neighbors or anything there. I don't want to base my decision on that. I want it to be based on what I interpreted and our ordinance to say how that line of sight is going to be determined. Now, if we have a disagreement, that's fine. But I want to express myself as, and this has nothing to do with the variance or all that, and if we make that decision, then we can look at variances. But this isn't a variance. This is an interpretation of how we determine the line of sight. All this is. It's not getting along with the neighbors, and I agree with that. I agree with that wholeheartedly. So you do want to get along with your neighbors. But we also have a responsibility to do things legally as much as we can here on this board. We can't just say, well, okay, that sounds good, so let's do it this way. We can't do that. I feel like I've got to make a decision that would stand up in court. If I feel like it wouldn't stand up in court, then I shouldn't make that decision. And it's not who I like, who I don't like, who I agree with. It's a decision that I need to make on my interpretation of what the rule says. And I think that's what we're trying to determine here.
Mr. President, Mr. Hubler has.
Yes, Mr. Hubler.
JD, do you have comments there?
Oh, no, I'm listening. Thank you, Chuck.
Okay, all right.
Okay, Mr. Manaway.
Yeah, what I have here, and this is the way it's coming down to me. I know Mr. Easterday brought this to determine a line of sight that was presented by Mr. DeWitt. Mr. DeWitt is the building commissioner, which is commissioned by the plan commission. And if he's determining by the orders or the ordinances that are made by the plan commission, now the only place that the BZA would be to appeal that in order to make an adjustment for what they might need to a variance for the determined line of sight. But for to bring to the BZA as far as to determine how he did it, wouldn't be to the BZA.
No, I know.
Because he's not commissioned by the BZA.
They're not asking for any.
So to me, I mean, it would be more of a question that should have been brought before the planning commission. And then if they didn't like it, they would appeal it to here as far as the actual decision. And then the next process would be the court if necessary.
You're speaking as president.
I'm thinking of president of the planning commission and vice president of the BZA.
That's sure.
But this
Yeah, just so everybody knows.
state statute and ordinance says that any decision of the building commissioner can be appealed to the BZA.
No.
Right, but you're not, you said you weren't appealing the decision, you was appealing.
That's right,
Process
petitioner.
was done.
Yeah,
You were actually petitioning as far as where the ordinance.
Were there.
exactly.
So.
That's why he said that he's come to us because that's what it says to do.
Only if he was petitioned as far as he was trying to argue as far as where it's at. He said he's not arguing where it's at, how it was done.
I don't understand that at all.
Well, how it's done changes where it's at.
Exactly, but I mean, he's not asking for that. He just
Okay,
said as
Chuck.
far as
I don't
determination.
understand what you're saying, Barry.
I think that the whole issue is Mr. Easterday is basically contesting Mr. Witt's decision and saying it was wrong. That's why he's here. And we don't have to petition for there. We're just saying, we're gonna live by this, we're gonna support that. And on top of that, we'll give it, in a word of compromise, we'll give a deed restriction on top of what we're doing. But this is just, he's saying your building commissioner didn't do it right. That's what Mr. Easterday is saying.
What Mr. Easterday is saying, and I stated this before, and I'll state it again, is that is a lot, one lot next door. And it is, and then there's a house on that lot. Now, it's the lot with the road going through it. We don't have any stipulations on, if there's a road going through a lot, but when you look at what the town granted as a lot, it's definitely one lot. It says lot one right there.
And I understand that.
And that's my interpretation of it.
I understand that. I agree that you said it, but you gotta look at your ordinance. And the key words in your ordinance that you're missing is immediately adjacent. So maybe the plan commission needs to go back and change their ordinance and make it more clear, but it says immediately adjacent. And that's what we're debating here.
If that is one lot, it's immediately adjacent. It goes right next to it.
Well, it doesn't. There's a road.
Oh, no, 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 no. No, down the lakeside, it definitely goes straight.
Then, if it goes, then why do we have a 25-foot side yard setback? That's what, I mean, that's what I'm saying. You got some tough questions because
Doesn't make sense.
it doesn't add up. You can't go back and forth. If you're saying it's one lot and there's nothing that cuts it into a split parcel, as I said, and there's nothing that supports Mr. DeWitt's determination to go to the lakefront part of that lot, which is, again, a triangular piece of land, then we come back before this board and say, well, we don't need a 25-foot side yard setback. We just need 10-foot, right? Because it's an adjacent parcel. As to Ms. Thimjon's concern with her parcel to the north, get my direction to the south, it goes to north. There's no question on that because it's right in line. That's a typical platted, it's square. You got 10-foot side yard setback and you're gonna be right in line with the next house. So I think we're getting off point here. And I think our new member made some great comments of record on Chuck's decision of how'd you make the decision, Chuck? What'd you base that on? And that's what we're determining. Did the building commissioner make a correct decision? Obviously, we're in favor of that decision. We support that decision. And for the upteenth time, we'll go beyond that decision for the neighbors and make a deed restriction.
And I'm only making one statement for myself, that I feel that it's one lot, but there are 4 other members of this board to make that decision. I'm voting what I feel is the right interpretation of it.
Sure.
That's all I can do.
Sure. And I respect that. I'm just.
And
yeah.
if the other 4 board members, that's fine. But I'm going to vote for what I think is correct.
Sure.
No matter what decision Mr. DeWitt made. And I think I made this statement at the last time. I know I made it to one person afterwards. I said, I don't think that would hold up in court. An interpretation, but that was my own opinion. And if I feel that way, then I shouldn't be voting for, well, it's interpreted that way anyway. If I feel like that's the wrong interpretation, then that's the way I'm gonna vote. That it is one lot. And I'm not trying to make friends. I'm trying to make what I think is the right decision. What I feel is legally correct.
Understood. And I guess I just want the board to try to think some logic on this as well, is that it's a curved, there's a curve and the lake curves. It's not square. It's not like Ms. Thimjon's next door neighbor, which is pretty obvious. You have a 25-foot setback from the lake. You can't get in front of that, right? And this is an unusual lot. So and I guess what I'm saying is I respect you, President, saying that as to that lot, but I keep coming back and saying, okay, if that is your conclusion, then you're in conflict with your side yard setback. Because we can't have a 25-foot side yard setback if this property's adjacent. We can't have 10 feet toward the Thimjon and 25 feet because of a road. That's the conflict. If you told me today, if that ordinance said they got 10 feet on both sides and we're going to use that structure as a line of sight, I don't have a lot of argument, right? But when you say, hey, there is no adjacent structure here, so you have a 25-foot side yard setback. If there was a house set where the road was, we'd only have 10 feet. And the only reason to go back to view and not to do, I was saying not from a lake view, but I was just saying from Mr. Weirick and Ms. Peltz's view. They don't even have a view of our property.
You're not changing anything.
Yeah, I'm not changing anything. And furthermore, we talked to the town that those trees are going nowhere.
Right,
Yeah.
because the ordinance does say where property adjacent on either side of the lot is already developed with principal structures. So the property that's actually adjacent with you has no structure.
Correct.
But the property, we're going proverbial here, and I'm not passing opinion here other than just opinion. But when you're going with adjacent property, one wants to argue adjacent property when the road definitely does not make it adjacent.
I disagree with you. I disagree with you 100%. The lot lines on those 2 parcels is a common line between 2 parcels, one owned by the Peltz Weirick and the other owned by the applicants here.
The right of way for the road is 40 feet. 40 feet wide divides everything along there. That isn't owned by anybody but the town.
I disagree with you.
Cool. Yeah, I understand.
Listen, the way I would add it, and I have
I disagree with you.
clients down that way that own a road back, and then they have a deeded pier. So are we going to at some point use the corner of their house for a sight line? I mean, it starts getting.
I think where he's trying to take you down the wrong road is if you look at your definition of right of way, it says a street, alley, sidewalk, easement, or other thoroughfare permanently established. And so we maintain that that road is an easement through there, and we own the property, always have, always will, and that's what causes the 25-foot setback. It's from the right of way. That's, and he's trying to pollute them.
It's not an easement, a road, I'm assuming that's a publicly
It is.
dedicated road.
No, it's not.
It's not.
No,
So it's
it's
a
not.
private road.
It's an easement that was an Indian trail that became an easement for public right of way.
Okay, well, I guess my argument back to you, Mr. Easterday, is I thoroughly respect the Indians, but at this point, we gotta get in the 21st century, 22nd,
Well,
make a determination on what is functional, and he's the expert, and all we're saying is we're here supporting his decision.
There's a case called Lane, Lake County Trust Company versus Lane that would happen just down the road, which went to the Court of Appeals, and they determined that that was an easement only. And when the railroad came out, it reverted to the neighbors that did not go to the county.
Then we should have a 10-foot setback.
No, it's from the defined right of way based upon the definition.
If we own the whole road. Because there's places on there that went back to owners on each side, so to the center of the road. And we're gonna try and open a whole big can of worms here if we're not careful.
No,
Exactly.
we already have.
Yes.
I just had one other comment. One of the things that we watched for almost a year and a half while this lot was for sale, the price dropped like $400,000 over time. I know the neighbors lowered the price multiple times. And the main reason was many people came and looked at it, but they felt like they couldn't build the house they wanted on it. I mean, we know specifically a couple of families who spent a lot of time looking at the lot, writing letters to the neighbors, trying to convince them to lower the price at the time because they didn't feel like it was, the initial draft like $2 million on it. They felt like that was too high because of where you could actually build on it. The price continued to it went down for almost a year. I mean, this was a time when everything else was selling very quickly. And one of the main reasons was because the realtor who had it up for sale was telling people about the setback. And so were many realtors who brought people through it. So just thought that was kind of an interesting.
And my response to that is, we did not hear from the realtor that represented the Gotchas at all about the sight line. We actually knew better than to rely on that. So we went to Chuck DeWitt before we bought the house to determine what the actual sight line was. So we did not rely like other people might have on the realtor. We did our due diligence and actually went to the person that was charged with making that line.
In my packet, I have that.
Mr. Weirick had a comment he wanted to make back there, please.
I have an original abstract going back 150 years.
This is Mr. Jim Weirick, who owns this property.
The road which you're referring to, which is West Shore Drive or South Street or West Shore Road, came straight to the railroad property and dead ended in essence because the railroad owned everything else. They owned it by deed or the way that it worked back then, the government gave the railroad the property. When the Jim can tell you more about it, but anyway, the road ran on railroad property. So, and there's nowhere in the abstract for 150 years where the road was ever platted, eased, deeded, or anything else. It's just there. And so to say it's not an easement or it's not, a platted road, it's not. And that makes our property, adjacent property, a contiguous piece, and it's adjacent to your property. Having said that, line of sight to me does mean what I can see. And the front of our house and the front of Thimjon's house should be the determining factor on the line of sight for the new house. But if they want an easement to run the house 7 or 10 foot farther forward, I don't have a problem with that, because all I'm going to lose is a picture of Verl's Pier. And that doesn't mean a lot. But what happens 50 years from now when they've sold the house and the next house goes the next 18 foot? Or since the 50-foot setback is just kind of pick it out of the air, it seemed nice at the time, why not go all the way to the 25-foot setback on the lake, since my house doesn't count? And when this house, my house sells, as it will eventually and be rebuilt, how far forward can I build on my lot and screw up the view of the DePapes on South Street or on Hoosier Lane?
They are in R1, they don't.
No, they're L1. They are L1.
Hoosier Lane?
Yes.
What's wrong with that?
In response, that's why I keep telling your attorney, we'll give you a deed restriction, so you don't gotta worry about what happens. in the next
That's
year.
great, but I think the right way is to determine the line of sight between the two houses, and you ask for the variance, and I won't object. Good.
Yes.
I just wanted to clarify that this property was not a fire sale. In September of 19, it was listed at $1,790,000. There was a price reduction to $1,650,000 in May of 20, and the purchase price of the property was $1,450,000. So it was frankly perhaps overpriced at the time by the original owners, and certainly from a market standpoint, it brought what is a very significant amount of money to the sellers.
And the only comment I'm gonna make here, and don't get me wrong, I don't care if the property sold for $5,000. The decision I have to make is on interpreting what I think are. It doesn't matter to me if it was a $2 million, $3 million property there. We're talking about the line of sight and what it determines. Has nothing to do with the property values. That's why all you people are here, because of the property values. The decision I have to make is on what the ordinance says.
Mr. Adams,
We can talk about money, but that doesn't have anything to do with this.
Go ahead, JD.
thank you. I just want to comment that in our ordinance on page 170 with our administrative appeals, the threshold that we have to meet in terms of granting an appeal is that we feel that the administrative person, in this case, Mr. DeWitt, was inconsistent with the provision of the ordinance or the application of the ordinance. And certainly that's been our discussion for the evening. And in our provision or our ordinance, there are one of two things. Either it's a 25-foot setback because there's no adjacent property, or there's a line of sight because there are immediate adjacent properties on both sides. Mr. DeWitt has determined that he did not believe that there was an adjacent property to the south of CSW Holdings. My question to Mr. DeWitt that I still need answered in terms of the inconsistency is, why did you go to 50 feet and not just keep it at 25 if you determined that there wasn't an adjacent property south of CSW Holdings?
At that time, CSW was able to build what they wanted to without, with that 50 foot, and hoping that Mr. Weirick would understand that I was looking at his interest in giving them twice as much, moving their setback to 50 feet instead of 25, so that he would not feel impeded upon. That's why I went to 50. And just so for the record, Miss Jenny Monroe was with me. We looked at it together. She is our town manager, and she agreed with me at that time. And I'm sorry I'm speaking so much tonight because we don't have our town attorney here to represent me. Okay, so I'm representing myself and I'm combating two attorneys on either side. So I'm talking probably more and sound like I'm defending myself, but I have to because we don't have a town attorney.
Well, no, I appreciate that. I appreciate that, Mr. DeWitt. I mean, I asked you a direct question, so, I appreciate you sharing the process that you use to make your determination.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Other comments? Well, we don't go to finding of facts on this. We look for, does anybody have a motion that we?
Would there be a finding of facts?
I don't think so.
No, I agree.
I think it'd just be on the interpretation.
No, just would agree in interpretation.
Somebody like to make the motion? For or against?
I would like to make a motion that we confirm and affirm Mr. DeWitt's line of sight determination on CSW property.
Okay, Mr. Hubler has made a motion that we affirm Mr. DeWitt's interpretation of the line of sight on the property. Do I hear a second?
I second.
Did you say you seconded these? Okay, and seconded by, yeah, keep looking at last name, Melson. That we, would you restate the exact thing you wrote there, Mr. Hubler?
Yeah, my motion was to confirm Mr. DeWitt's current line of sight determination for CSW Holdings property.
Okay, correct. Does everybody understand the?
I think the procedure part of it is that we're looking for, right, for this determination.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion on it? Okay. How do you vote on the motion, Mr.
No.
Osborne?
No.
Mr. McManaway?
No.
Mr.
No.
I have to keep looking. Melson? You voted no on the motion also?
I vote for.
Okay, you're voting yes then, okay. Mr. Hubler?
Yes.
And the chair votes no. Therefore, we need to talk about what we think is the proper way.
That isn't before you.
Yeah.
Excuse me, I have to go to the next.
Okay.
With all due respect, it is. We've asked you for a determination.
Wait till the commissioner comes back. Mr. White, who owns the property directly to the north or south of you?
To the
There.
south, Christine DePape.
I'm sorry,
Christine DePape.
you paid?
Yeah, I believe that's how you pronounce it.
Okay.
They owned a house up here.
And
just
that used to
north
be,
of-
both those houses were on one lot, am I correct? And that's
No.
when you divided it?
No, There was 5 lots.
There were 5 lots there.
There were 5 lots, and in order to put lakefront, the 1213 South Street, we combined all 5 and then divvied it up into 2.
And the zoning board approved that,
The zoning,
or the,
the planning
Commission.
commission approved it, and approved it as single lots in both cases. As I stated earlier, there's nothing in the abstract going back 170 years that establishes that road, but obviously it's there. So when Plymouth Land Survey made out plat of the property, obviously they included the road, but there's nothing anywhere deeding that road to the city, the county, the
President,
state, or anything.
Mr. President.
Yes.
I would say that the case is over, the vote has been made, we should go on to the next.
Yeah,
This is
I agree,
irrelevant
I
at this
agree.
point.
well,
You should not have the floor.
I just want to make one comment too. My name's Tim Skelton.
No, there is no more comments. It's over.
I'm just out here and I just want to say the property, I'm just curious, property tax wise, we pay, I believe, 17,000 a year.
I don't want to get into property taxes. This is the place for that.
There's a lot.
We do have one other item on the agenda tonight. I asked Mr. Inkster my written question, he was not, okay. This was asking about the property to the south.
Sorry, I had to step out of it. I haven't from the You don't know yet.
Okay, the other second item on the agenda is 2021-031B. And this is filed by Thomas Sargent. Are they online tonight?
No, the Hetzels are here, if, Mr. President, if I may address you and the group. So my name is Charles Hetzel, and this is my wife, Sarah Hetzel. Her father, Thomas Sargent, still living, owns the property. Sarah has power of attorney with her brother. We were actually on Zoom last month, and we, I think our record was just broken by the discussion there, but I learned a lot more than I ever want to know about zoning. Tonight, I would just say that I realized that you're new, and then Mr. JD, wasn't a part of the conversation before. We applied for an application for a property improvement and explained our, we explained our property improvement. If you want to share that with JD. We applied for an application for a variance on August 23rd, and we were on the agenda last month, and there was a great discussion about, we were asking for a variance on the setback of the lake. We determined through Mr. DeWitt and the board's discussion that actually you weren't able to vote on that because of I'll call it a technicality in terms of we weren't asking the right question. There was lots of questions that you asked me, and we shared all the planning that we've done this year. I would say there's 2 new facts since the last time we met. Just want to confirm the determination that you're voting on tonight is on a variance on the 30-inch height. I will confirm for you that the height of the shed that we've designed and wish to purchase and build on the shore is actually 86 inches and 7/12. So we're asking for a variance of 66 inches. And the other thing that I would like to share, my wife, Sarah, has a copy of a letter, email. Today, we have spoke to both of our direct neighbors. I know this letter went out to pretty much everybody on the East Shore that would have a say on this. We spoke to the Nicolais, who are at 18 East Shore. They kindly sent the letter saying that they're fine with this. And we also spoke to the Sam's family of Carmel, and they were aware of the letter that went out and they had no concerns. Is there anything else to add? I did not go over the hardship piece but I'm happy to do that.
No, good.
Okay. Okay.
Mr. Hetzel, could you make sure that we have a copy of those 2 emails for the record, whether you email it to me or give a hard copy to Mr. Adams?
Of the letter?
Yes.
Yes, I
Or
did
just-
give a hard copy to
All
Mr. President.
I've got it, yes.
All right, thank you. Great.
This is not a permanent structure.
It is not. It is a well-designed shed, as you can see, that matches the garage that we put on the front of the property, same colors, et cetera. It has a roof on it. It will be anchored onto pea gravel so that it won't, blow away or things like that, but there's no foundation, no concrete going in. It's an improvement for Sarah and I as we age, so that we're the highest lot on the lake, so that we no longer have to carry up our pier furniture, life jackets, et cetera. That's the sole purpose of the shed.
And many other homes along the East Shore and all over the lake have these sheds.
And to go along with their height, from their house to the lake, it drops 75 feet. 42 feet and 75 from the house to the lake. So it drops
The elevation.
the elevation.
So you can't, in other words, you cannot, your neighbor really can't even see this.
No.
No, we won't be able to see it. Or,
Because, that's a really big deal, because.
oh, it's a huge deal. Yeah.
So, because-
The only reason the permanent structure really is, thing as far as Andrew, as far as what I look at on this one, as far as versus permanent not, is actual not technically lake when you don't pour concrete, there's the advantage of having peacefully used for protection lake. As far as any structure that's put on, it's actually, according to one to consider the permanent.
Yes, sir.
How far is the pea gravel how far beyond the structure is it going to go?
Only 1 to 1.5 feet.
Is that gonna, well, I guess my point being, is the runoff from that roof is it gonna be able to go on the pea gravel, or can it?
It will have, yeah, we've already had an engineer look into that in terms of the runoff, because there are no gutters on the structure, Mr. Osborne. So,
Right, so we want a pervious surface that it can go onto.
correct,
Yeah.
correct. So there will be a pervious surface to absorb the water.
And
Gravel bed is stated to be 11 by 7.
I'm sorry.
Gravel bed is stated to be 11 by 7.
And we're happy to add to that if that's required, if that's one of your concerns.
Have to be looking at that. What they're looking for.
So will you be removing it outside of summertime?
No.
Actually, the way you put it, it's been kind of deterred erosion as far as that point right there.
Yeah, Sarah can tell you from her history when her father bought the property about the direct neighbors, not
The
anybody.
Muehlhausen's took out a bunch of trees and the bank slid in. That's why they had to put that whole structure there.
Right.
Save the bank.
Yeah.
It's since been divided, as you guys know.
But we discussed this lots the last time.
Yeah, we did.
Yeah.
We need, anybody else have any more
I was
questions?
Reiterating for him.
I read through it.
Okay.
I read through the notes from last week too.
Does Mr. Ubler have anything? I know he's on Zoom and that's hard to.
JD, do you have any questions?
No.
Any comments from the audience? That's dwindled a lot. Not, are we ready to move to finding of facts? Yes.
With 16 inches.
The height of the structure will be
Fill out JD.
86 and 7/12. And so 86 and 7/12 minus the 30% permitted, so it's a delta of 66 inches and
56.
66.
60, 30 from 6 from 86.
No.
Oh, no, you're right, 56 and 7/12.
My math was different.
My wife just
All right.
corrected me. I got a little whisper in the ear there.
All right, just to confirm for the record, I'm writing down 56 inches.
56.
56 inches.
Okay, thank you.
JD, I'm going to fill out your finding us facts as you.
Okay,
Okay.
great, thank you.
So we put, as far as petitioner goes, we put 3-1.
Yeah.
No, I meant as far as who's, is it?
That's it.
Just so it's down sort of. We're started. Yeah. That's fine. And remember, if you vote no on any of these questions, you must vote no on the or the variance. Based upon the evidence submitted, I find that number one, the approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. Mr. Osborne.
Yes.
Mr. McManaway.
Yes.
Mr. Melchon.
Yes.
Mr. Hubler.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Number two, the use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. Mr. Osborne.
Yes.
Mr. McManaway.
Yes.
Mr. Melchon.
Yes.
Mr. Hubler.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Number three, the strict application of the terms of the zoning ordinance will result in practical difficulties in the use of the property. Mr. Osborne.
Yes.
Mr. McManaway.
Yes.
Mr. Melchon.
Yes.
Melchon, sorry. Mr. Hubler.
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. I would entertain a motion that we approve this variance. I'll make a motion. Been moved by Mr. Osborne and seconded by Mr. McManaway that we approve this variance. Any further discussion?
Thank you.
How do you vote on the variance?
Yes.
Mr. McManaway?
Yes.
Mr. Melchon?
Yes.
Mr. Hubler?
Yes.
And the chair votes yes. Approved 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hope your December meeting is very short.
We're hoping not to have one.
That's right.
I don't have
Just be glad you went second. It's been kind of,
Gotcha.
after all, we're ready to get out of here.
Crazy thing is, I went to college with someone in the front row. We played football together and I didn't have a chance. I haven't seen him in 30 years. So, yeah, that's a story for another day.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, now I've lost my agenda. That's all right, I guess what's on I think all that's left is old business, new business.
Just old business. New business.
Building commissioner report, you have any old business? Of course.
Not now, you got.
New business. Commissioners report.
Wanted to bring something up. The town council put together a work session on this past Monday. You were all invited to that. It was to have the town council, the plan commission, and the BZA working on.
Wasn't it CDC as well?
On what?
Wasn't it the redevelopment committee as well? No.
No, whether it's after the redevelopment committee meeting.
Okay.
But it was to talk about various things that we've been having issues with, and what was that in particular?
Unsafe buildings.
Unsafe buildings.
Yeah.
Because we're trying to put together an ordinance that will cover what we're trying to get done in the way that it should be. And so the thought process was have the plan commission there as well as the BZA, because you're going to have to defend it maybe in court, whatever we say. So it was pretty disappointing when the town council were the only people there. So I don't know what we're going to do. We're going to try to get out some information to you individually. If you would comment on unsafe.
I didn't.
Everybody,
Even-
everything got that email.
I didn't need receive any. The only email I got was on the
22nd.
the ones coming up on Monday.
Yeah, right. On
And when you mentioned it in the plan commission meeting, I had no idea that you guys had a meeting. I would have been there.
Actually, they didn't, I mean, they went, we didn't go.
Yeah, maybe
And maybe it didn't get to everybody
something happened
the
there.
correct way.
I will say what we're getting ready to do is rewrite the unsafe building ordinance. And I will tell you that as of the first of the year, you will have a different attorney here every
Right.
week. It'll be Jeanette Cerisi.
Yeah,
Yes.
I heard that too.
We heard
I
that.
appreciate that, Bill, more than.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Picking it
Jeanette's,
right.
Jeanette's in the process. She's on vacation right now, and then she's got some depositions, but she's taking on this additional duty. And she will rewrite the unsafe building ordinance and pattern it the way she wants to do it, and use probably the city of Elkhart as the model, and also something that Jim has already written. So and this will happen over the next several months, but I mean, you know, there will be an ordinance with some teeth in it. And her idea is to get from start to finish within a year's period of time.
She will also be attending our BZA meeting.
That is correct.
Then the next time this happens, she could represent.
That's correct.
I don't know that we've ever gone through this before, so.
As far as this particular situation, it's new, very new.
Oh, sure.
But I know as far as situation, as far as attorney being needed because of mediated appeals, yes.
And what the council is trying to do is, you know, step up the procedures under the unsafe building ordinance to, you know, bring them to the forefront quicker. You know, I will tell you that we did have two people in the audience that night. One was Kevin Berger and one was Bob Cooper. So both of them are aware, not that there's a problem with both of them, but I'm just saying.
It was exposure of two worlds.
It is. And we're hopeful, right, as soon as, you know, one property gets taken care of, that'll get the message out there. And I will also, and you might as well just update, BGA, it doesn't pertain to them, but the Boastful property is to what the county unsafe building is doing.
Oh, yeah.
Well, the county unsafe building, committee voted to clean that up, tear that down, and get rid of that old fire and everything that we've been waiting around for. There were two bids that came in. One was for 6,000 and one for 6,090.
6,500 or 6,900.
Yeah, they were close.
We're talking about Jeffy.
Yeah, but you might not know it. Oh, who's our guy on 17th Road?
Hopple.
Yes, George Hopple was out there today with his guys in his truck cleaning up stuff and whatever.
On 17?
Yeah, 17th.
No, on
No, on both.
the Jefferson.
His property?
Oh, on Jefferson.
On Jefferson.
Really?
Yes,
Really?
yes.
Did he have the pollution machine with him?
Pollution machine.
His front loader that makes a
Oh.
billow of smoke.
No, that wasn't it. They were
Like
doing
the
a skid
mosquito.
loader. But the unsafe building committee planned on tearing that down, the concrete out and that back building out that was on fire, right?
Right.
Okay, so I don't know that that's their plan. So I would think that you might want to, whoever did it, have them get out there and finish the job.
I'll pass that on and they'll put them to some kind of thing.
You want to
Do we-
clear that up one more time, because I think I.
The unsafe building committee for Marshall County.
From the county.
I mean, go back to Humble, is what I'm talking about.
Oh, Hopple was out there cleaning that stuff, cleaning up Boatsman's.
Cleaning or rummaging?
Well-
You're talking about, but you're talking about Boatsman here.
It's dumpster
Boatsman's
diving.
on Jefferson.
Jefferson, okay.
Yeah, that's the one where they had got the,
Yeah, I just want to make sure the same one you're
Right.
getting the bids for to clean up.
Andrew made a comment, it was rummaging or, actually they were pulling metal out of there and putting it on a trailer and they were sorting this and that.
Setting up for scrap.
Okay, so you know that.
Sure, I'll drive by and see it later.
Yeah, it'll be on 17th Road.
That's right, yeah.
Maybe they take the recycling.
Sure.
Scraps up.
Do we have any things on the agenda for next month, do you know?
Not that I know of right now.
Keep our fingers
If
crossed.
we don't have anything by tomorrow morning,
Okay.
you cancel it, okay?
Be nice to have a month off, but it's been rough, no, it's been a rough year.
To try and help a little bit.
And to, you know, Dan, what a meeting to initiate
Yeah.
the improvement.
Right.
We've been here till 9 o'clock before, buddy. I'm just warning you.
Before we
We've been
adjourn,
mad.
before we adjourn, I'd like to say something here though, because I did have a conversation with, meeting with, Jim Clevenger, the town attorney, and Jenny, actually, her and I met. And from what the discussion came down to, we have given some legal advice as far as where to proceed, as far as the plan commission side of it, that we might alleviate a whole lot more problems that we've had here. So, without discussing it publicly, whatever that is, I mean, I'm just saying. Of course, ordinance, looking at the ordinances, and stuff like that. Forward with the plan commission.
I won't say anything past what you said, except that it's going to pertain to
Tonight.
setbacks, line of sight, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
Because we are, just because.
Yeah.
Anything else.
That's why I couldn't really say more what arguments on this part here or for it or against it.
So at some point, there could possibly be some significant changes, which could eliminate some of the things coming for this board.
And not just line of sight. Just start.
The plan commission will be working on it.
Trying to work together.
Well, you know, and don't get me wrong here. But I think we have to learn to work together, but I also think we need to realize that we are not the plan commission. We are a separate thing and we're the intent of what is written is not what we're looking at. We're looking at what's written. Does that make sense?
Right, and this is what. we're
Because we
looking
have
at.
to ensure what's written, not what was
That's
intended.
exactly.
That's why we need to keep it
That's
separate.
That's exactly what we're trying to say. We're trying to make sure that the wording is not
Defendable.
ambiguous.
Ambiguous, right?
And that's what, Mr. Clevenger really, I mean, he reiterated several times. And ambiguity is the key. You've got to eliminate as much as you can, and you can't, it's impossible.
Oh, yeah.
to
That was
eliminate
my
it all.
struggle with this case. That L1, that's the only place that I read that it talked about property and not a lot or parcel.
Right, but it
Adjacent
also
property.
says, but it's talking about, you know, that part already has primary structure In other words, it develops property.
Somebody gonna make a motion to adjourn?
Yeah.
Oh, that's important.
And this is off the record, but I didn't,
I make. the
but
motion.
I think it makes our job tough is the fact that, people talking about paying $2 million for property. That has nothing to do with it. That it almost made me
Feel bad.
pretty bad. But
Oh, yeah.
yeah, it's like, it shouldn't matter if it's worth 2 million or if it's worth 5,000. You gotta treat it the same way.
Exactly.
Right.
That's what legal things are.
Yeah, you cannot make any difference. I mean, a lot of times you talk about as far as the variance effects of the property, and a lot of people are trying to use that because it makes it worth a little bit less due to whatever. But that person might have like higher price property because he's got a big old giant pool out there or whatever, and the other guy don't. So I mean, no, we can't look at the variances in price and the value because of whatever. Gotta be what's right for that property. We're looking at the variance due to that single property, not the property next door.
I'm assuming CSW is gonna come back, yes. They're gonna be able to build a house.
He said that they weren't, that
No, they weren't going to as in, if they got the line of sight is.
I don't think that's what,
They're still gonna have to have that side yard setback.
Dan, I think what.
Right,
I think
they'll
what-
ask for a variance.
We're
Right.
discussing.
Right, I know, but they still have to ask for a variance. They said they wouldn't ask.
No, he wasn't going to, they were gonna
If it was
build,
approved,
they were gonna not have to have it with the.
We probably shouldn't
So they
talk about this, right?
Change them.
Yeah,
You're right.
Well,
yes, you're right, JD.
the one lady that said.
He said on there, he got.
She was the only one here last time, I think.
Right.
So I think
She got thrown into the Shark Tank.
Yeah, she did. And I think probably some of them at home weren't real happy with maybe what she had said. I don't know. That's why they were more over here tonight, but.
Well, yeah.
Okay, motion was made and seconded.
Yeah.
All in favor? Okay, meeting adjourned.
Are we off the record?
Yeah.